There is a silence that comes after pain, a silence not of peace, but of confusion, of injustice, of questions left unanswered. It is the kind of silence that forms when someone who should have cared walks away without a trace of remorse, the kind of silence that fills the room when your heart has been broken and the one who broke it feels no weight in their chest. There are wounds not made by weapons, but by people who claimed to love you and then acted like you never mattered at all. How does one speak about the hurt caused by hands that never trembled? How do you begin to explain the ache left behind by a betrayal that came with a smile? You trusted them. You opened your soul, and they walked over it like it was nothing more than dust. They did not flinch. They did not break. They simply moved on, as if you were disposable, as if your suffering was a small price to pay for their selfish peace. But you carried it, quietly, faithfully. You didn't fight back with venom or vengeance. You whispered prayers in the dark, asking God why the ones who inflicted the most pain seemed to flourish while you struggled to breathe. You asked why your love became your punishment, why your kindness became your cross. And above all, you wondered, would they ever feel what you felt? Would justice ever find them? Let me tell you something eternal. God is not blind to the pain you carried in silence. The tears they ignored were not lost in the shadows. They fell into the hands of a just and holy God. A God who does not forget, who does not overlook, and who does not allow cruelty to go unanswered. We often think that justice must be loud, that vindication must come in grand, visible waves. But divine justice is different. It moves in stillness. It waits until the prideful heart has grown arrogant enough to think they've escaped the consequences, and then it whispers their name. It visits them in the quiet moments when the noise of the world fades, and they are left alone with the echo of what they did to you. You may not see it today, you may not see it tomorrow, but those who hurt you without guilt will one day carry the same weight they placed on you, not because you cursed them, not because you sought revenge, but because God is a God of balance, and what they gave will return, measure for measure, hurt for hurt, tear for tear. Do you believe they can truly run from the pain they caused? Can they silence the memories that God Himself has written into the fabric of their conscience? No matter how high they climb, no matter how much they distract themselves, the moment will come. The moment when they feel what you felt, not out of cruelty, but because divine justice demands balance. What they did to you in the dark, they will now face in the light. So, do not be afraid if they seem unaffected today. Do not lose faith because their life looks untouched. God is not finished. The story is still unfolding. And the same way He carried you through the pain, He will carry them through the lesson. Their comfort came at the cost of your suffering. God will reverse the roles to awaken their conscience. There is a kind of comfort that should never have existed, the kind born not of peace, but of plunder. The kind of comfort that one enjoys not because they have done what is good, but because they have abandoned responsibility and left someone else to carry the burden. And, perhaps most grievous of all, is when that burden was once a heart, yours, that only sought to love. They thrived while you wept. They laughed while you wrestled with tears that refused to dry. They rested while your mind battled the chaos of betrayal. And worst of all, they felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, no ache. It was as if your suffering was invisible, irrelevant even, because it interfered with their pleasure, their ease, their chosen illusion. But the soul is never unmarked by the pain it causes. While they may seem untouched now, rest assured, The divine ledger is never wrong. The comfort they purchased by stepping over your soul has a price, and it will be paid. The God who made you did not look away when you cried alone. He did not flinch when your heart was broken in secret. No, he took note, and what was given in cruelty will one day be returned. Not to satisfy wrath, but to awaken the slumbering conscience that has long refused to see the truth. God's way is never to destroy a soul recklessly. Instead, he gently, painfully, deliberately removes the mask they wear. He allows them to taste what they once dismissed, to sit in the seat they once assigned to you. He rearranges the stage of life in such a way that those who were once numb are now pierced, not to mock them, but to make them feel. And this reversal of roles, it comes not as revenge, but as divine alignment. For there is no growth without sorrow, no light without the recognition of darkness, no healing without the awareness of wounds. They will know what it is like to feel abandoned. They will know the silence of unanswered questions, the ache of invisible pain, the torment of being misunderstood. And through it, they will finally understand the value of the soul they once disregarded. This is how God restores honor to the wounded, not merely by healing the broken, but by opening the eyes of those who did the breaking. The very comfort they enjoyed will become foreign to them. The roles will shift, and they will look at their own reflection and see not pride, but the sorrow they once caused. In this holy turning of tables, you are not forgotten. You are not the one left behind. You are the one being lifted quietly by the hands of heaven, while they are brought to the place where true repentance begins, not in words, but in experiencing the very pain they once thought did not matter. Yea, God heard the cry they ignored. He will let them cry in silence the way you did. There is no sound more sacred than the cry of a wounded soul. It travels farther than any shout, deeper than any sermon, and truer than any song. It is the unspoken confession of pain, the trembling echo of love betrayed, the raw music of a heart that has been stretched beyond its limits. And when you cried, when the night swallowed your voice and your tears soaked the pillow, they heard nothing. But God did. They did not stop to ask what their words had done to your spirit. They did not pause to see the trembling in your hands or the tiredness in your eyes. They assumed their silence was justified. They believed your sadness was weakness. They walked away thinking the matter was closed. But in the unseen realm, your cries were rising. Each tear was a prayer. Each sigh was a message. Each sleepless hour was a call to the one who never slumbered. And God answered not with immediate wrath, but with silence of his own. Not a cruel silence, but a preparatory one. A silence that speaks of justice yet to come. For the one who weeps with the wounded does not rush to correct injustice. He allows it to grow to fullness, so that when he acts, no one can deny the fairness of his hand. In time they will weep. Not because you demanded it, but because God decreed it. Not out of vengeance, but out of divine balance. For the one who disregards the tears of the innocent will one day be brought to tears themselves, not of sorrow alone, but of awareness. The silence you endured will become their own teacher. They will cry, and no one will come. They will ask questions, and no one will answer. They will long for comfort, and it will evade them, not forever, but until they see, until they remember. God does not simply punish. He awakens. He arranges circumstances in such a way that the soul cannot escape the mirror it has long avoided. When they cry in silence, it will not be to mock them. It will be to allow them to feel what you once felt, to walk the same path they forced you to walk, to understand the weight of a heart left unseen. Their silence was a choice. Your silence was a consequence. But now, by divine justice, the equation will reverse. God will take them where you have been, not to destroy them, but to redeem them, if they so choose. Yet make no mistake, they will feel it. The very loneliness they crafted will become their companion, and in their isolation, they will realize what it means to hurt someone who only ever prayed for peace. They forgot what they did, but God never forgets a wounded soul. Human memory is fragile. It fades by convenience and often bends to self-preservation. Those who hurt you without guilt may convince themselves that their actions were small, their words harmless, their silence justified. Over time, they revise the story in their mind, not to seek forgiveness, but to escape conviction. And so, they move forward as if nothing happened, forgetting not just the details of what they did, but the person they did it to. But heaven's memory does not rust. It is not subject to distortion or delay. God, in His perfection, remembers every wounded soul, not in bitterness, but in truth. He remembers the tear you wiped when no one else noticed. He remembers the breath you held back to keep from crying in public. He remembers the words that cut through your spirit and the nights that buried you in silence. While they erased the scene from their memory, heaven engraved it into eternity. We are taught that God is love, and that is true. But His love includes a fierce defense of those who suffer in righteousness. He does not stand idly by while cruelty cloaks itself in forgetfulness. No, He watches, He records. Not because He needs to punish swiftly, but because He ensures that nothing inflicted in secret remains hidden forever. There will be a day when what they have forgotten is brought back to them, not in accusation, but in revelation. A day when the past they dismissed walks toward them with holy clarity, and they are made to remember what they chose to forget. The beauty of divine justice is that it requires no malice. It simply restores balance. What was denied will be revealed. What was hidden will be brought to light. The heart they wounded was not forgotten by the one who formed it. In a world where people grow numb to their sins and desensitized to others' suffering, God remains perfectly attentive. He is the keeper of every sorrow, the witness to every unjust act, the defender of every broken soul. They may forget the conversation that broke you. They may forget the betrayal, the abandonment, the moments you held out your hand and they turned away. But God remembers. And when He brings these memories back to them, it won't be as a flood of shame for shame's sake, but as an invitation to confront the truth they buried beneath indifference. There is a sacred justice in being remembered by God, a kind of holy comfort that comes when you realize your suffering was never ignored. This remembering is not only for their awakening, it is also for your healing. When you were dismissed, heaven paid attention. When your name was dragged, God preserved its true meaning. And when they chose to forget, He chose to remember for you, so that when the day comes, you will not be the one crying for validation. Truth will speak for itself. The hurt you carried will rise as a testimony, and the silence you endured will echo in the ears of the one who caused it. They forgot, but God never does. And that remembrance is a shield over your life and a mirror before theirs. You carried guilt for what they did. Now they will carry the guilt they once denied. One of the heaviest crosses to bear is guilt that was never yours to carry. When you are wronged by someone you trusted, the pain is not limited to the act itself. It spreads like a shadow into the heart that was meant only to love. You begin to question yourself. Was I too much? Did I deserve this? Could I have done something differently? And so begins the cruel exchange. They sin, and you carry the shame. That is how evil often operates. It plants its seed and leaves the garden untended. The one who sowed the damage walks away clean, while the one left behind waters the soil with tears of confusion and false blame. In your innocence, you bore the weight they refused to acknowledge. You carried their silence, their coldness, their betrayal, as if it were a judgment upon your worth. And they, in their blindness, slept soundly, convinced the chapter was closed. But the story is not over. For God, who sees what man cannot, does not let guilt go misplaced forever. There is a divine justice that rewrites the ledger, a reversal not of roles, but of responsibility. The guilt that sat wrongly on your shoulders will be lifted, not by your hand, but by the hand of heaven, and returned to its rightful owner. This return is not a curse, it is a correction. The truth must come home, and it always does. What was done in deceit will one day be felt in the light, not because you accused them, but because the Spirit of truth makes no errors. There is a time appointed in every life when the conscience awakens, and when it does, it brings with it the memory of every ignored cry, every manipulated moment, every stone-hearted decision. They denied guilt for so long that they may have started to believe they were right. But self-deception cannot withstand divine revelation. Sooner or later, guilt finds the soul it belongs to. It does not knock loudly, nor does it demand attention at once. It seeps in, slowly, in a familiar place, in a quiet moment. It revisits the past like a ghost, whispering, "Do you remember what you did? Do you understand what you caused?" And when that moment comes, it is not easily dismissed. The same numbness they lived with becomes the very thing that betrays them. They will feel guilt not as an abstract idea, but as a presence, a weight, a truth that refuses to leave. What they denied for so long will now live within them, not to destroy them, but to offer the painful mercy of awareness. For you it is a moment of vindication. You no longer have to carry what was never yours. The shame that whispered lies to your spirit will be silenced by the voice of truth. God, in his perfect justice, does not just comfort the broken, he convicts the breaker, and in doing so he sets you free. The guilt they once denied will return, not with rage but with righteousness, not with bitterness but with purpose, and it will rest not on your heart but on theirs, where it always belonged. God delays punishment not out of mercy for them, but preparation for a perfect justice. The human heart is often troubled by delay. It struggles when pain is met not with swift vindication, but with silence. When those who wounded us continue to smile, prosper, and live as if nothing has been fractured, we begin to ask uncomfortable questions. Why does God wait? Why does he not move quickly? Why does he allow those who destroy others to move freely, as if unchained by the consequences of their choices? This is where the sacred nature of divine justice begins to unfold, not as man imagines it, but as heaven orchestrates it. God does not delay because he is passive. He delays because true justice is not a reaction, it is a revelation. It is not a hammer that falls in haste, but a scale that waits until the weight is fully measured. While we see time slipping through our fingers, he sees the fullness of every action, every motive, every secret layered beneath the surface of human behavior. Punishment, in the heavenly sense, is never about revenge. It is about clarity. God waits not because he is indifferent, but because he is building something deeper. A moment where what was once hidden becomes undeniable. He waits until the proud heart has climbed high enough that the fall will awaken them. He waits until the echo of their own choices finds them in the quiet, when no audience remains, when no excuse is left to utter. And in that moment, justice is not only seen, it is understood. This is the difference between the justice of man and the justice of God. Man wants to see the guilty suffer quickly. God wants the guilty to see why they suffer. God wants the heart that inflicted harm to confront itself, not in the heat of wrath, but in the stillness of realization. That takes time, that takes preparation. For a soul to feel what it refused to feel, it must be brought to a place of vulnerability. And so, the delay is not an escape, it is a setup. While they go on in their ways, imagining perhaps that they have escaped the consequences, God is aligning the truth like stars. He is letting them run in circles of their own design, unaware that every step is leading them closer to the moment of reckoning, not for destruction, but for reflection. Every careless word, every cold silence, every act of betrayal they forgot. These things do not vanish into nothing. They gather, they wait, they prepare for their return. And in the meantime, God is not idle. He is also tending to you, the wounded soul who stood still in the aftermath. He is shaping your strength. He is soothing your spirit. He is preparing you for the moment when the scales tip and truth breaks through the surface. The delay is not just for their awakening, it is for your rising, because when justice comes, it comes in such a way that no one can claim coincidence. It comes with clarity, so sharp that even the blind must see. God's justice does not wear a clock, it wears eternity. It waits until the soil is ripe, until the conscience is ready to feel, until the story has matured into its fullest expression. What looks like delay is actually a divine appointment. What seems like hesitation is holy patience. And when the moment finally arrives, it is not driven by rage, it is driven by perfection. God punishes not to crush, but to correct. And He corrects in a way that leaves no room for denial. You may wonder why the wicked sleep peacefully while the innocent toss and turn. You may ask why their hands are not trembling as yours did, but the answer is not found in speed. It is found in timing. A time will come when the false peace they built will crumble under the truth they refuse to face, and that truth, when it comes, will not ask for their permission. It will arrive exactly when heaven says it is ready, and on that day, justice will no longer be a hope, it will be a reality. The same heart they broke will become the standard of their judgment. There is a mystery in the way God balances justice, a mystery that lies not in thunderous punishments or divine spectacles, but in the quiet, personal reckonings that visit a soul uninvited. When someone breaks another's heart, knowingly, selfishly, without remorse, they imagine that the damage disappears once they walk away. To them, it is an event concluded, a decision justified, a feeling dismissed. But what they fail to understand is this: the heart they broke becomes the very lens through which heaven will weigh their character. In the realm of eternity, God does not need to fabricate trials or invent punishment to reach the soul of the cruel. He uses their own history, their own actions, their own choices as the instruments of their judgment. He does not need to summon angels to accuse them. He merely holds up the image of the person they hurt, the tears they ignored, the kindness they exploited, the love they discarded. That image becomes their mirror. That wound becomes their testimony. That broken heart becomes the evidence heaven presents against them. They believed that by discarding the heart that once loved them, they were freeing themselves from responsibility. But in doing so, they crafted their own judgment, not through divine fire, but through divine memory. And when the time comes, They will not be judged by the grand failures they imagined mattered most. No, they will be judged by the small cruelties they buried beneath excuses. The rolled eyes, the sarcastic replies, the absence when they were needed most, the betrayal wrapped in charm, the silence that screamed louder than words. God is not a judge who merely weighs action. He weighs intention, and the intention behind breaking a pure heart is never hidden. They knew what they were doing. They saw the fragility in your voice, the trust in your eyes, the hope in your silence. They recognized the sacred offering of your presence, your loyalty, your love, and still they stepped on it. Not because they misunderstood, but because they believed they could, because they believed no one would hold them accountable for a sin so quietly committed. But God does, and He does it with terrifying precision. He does not send storms or plagues to those who wounded others carelessly. He sends memory. He sends reflection. He sends a moment when they themselves are wounded in the same way, and suddenly the pain they once dismissed becomes alive inside them. Suddenly they understand. They feel what they once ignored. They kneel in the same grief they once laughed at from a distance. This is not a punishment born from wrath. It is justice born from love, a love that values every soul too deeply to let harm go unanswered. The broken heart you carried is not just a byproduct of their cruelty. It is the instrument by which they will come to know who they truly are. When God allows someone to sit in the pain they once inflicted, it is not to destroy them. It is to reveal them, and nothing reveals the soul more clearly than being wounded in the same place they once wounded others. There will come a time when your image, once erased from their mind, returns in full color, not as nostalgia, but as a question from God Himself. Do you remember what you did to this one? Do you recall the weight they carried for you? Did you ever stop to see the damage your absence left behind? In that moment, they will not be able to answer, for the evidence will not be theoretical. It will live inside their own pain. And it is not only emotional pain that God uses for judgment. He uses silence. He uses loneliness. He uses abandonment. The very ingredients they once handed to you, He now gives them, not as punishment, but as perspective. And in that holy exchange, their heart becomes the canvas upon which justice paints its masterpiece. What they broke will now shape them. What they belittled will. Do not underestimate the memory of a broken heart in God's courtroom. He does not need accusers. He only needs the truth. And truth, no matter how long it sleeps, always wakes. Your tears were never invisible. Your loyalty was never wasted. Your silence was never unrecorded. In fact, it was written in heaven as a testimony. And now, that testimony stands not in your defense. It stands in judgment against the one who shattered it. The sorrow they left you with becomes the scale on which their soul is weighed, not because you demanded it, but because justice demands nothing less than honesty. And there is nothing more honest than the reflection of a heart that was pure, shattered by hands that should have held it. God will use their own actions to humble them. Pain will be the teacher they cannot refuse. There are moments in life when pride blinds the soul so completely that it no longer hears the quiet warnings of conscience. It ignores the whisper of kindness. It rejects the tug of mercy. It pushes forward, intoxicated by self-importance, convinced that actions bear no weight as long as consequences are avoided. And so they hurt you, not by accident, but with boldness, with an almost casual disregard. They carved wounds into your heart, confident they would never feel the sting of such cuts themselves. But God is not a passive observer of cruelty. His justice is not built on lightning bolts or thunderous curses. It is built on truth. And truth, when it comes back around, does not knock gently. It enters the soul through the very doors the person once used to escape responsibility. It returns through the memories they tried to erase, the decisions they tried to justify, the wounds they thought would never resurface. But this time, it does not knock for permission. This time, it arrives as pain. A teacher they cannot dismiss, a lesson they cannot ignore. When a person refuses to learn through grace, God allows them to learn through grief. It is not because He takes pleasure in their suffering, but because He honors truth so deeply that He will not let it remain buried. They rejected the quiet conviction of the Spirit, so now they will meet the holy fire of reflection, and it is not inflicted from the outside. It rises from within. It is born out of their own actions, their own words, their own choices. They become their own undoing, not because God cursed them, but because He allowed them to reap what they so freely sowed. This is the humility that does not come through sermons or speeches. It is the kind that comes when someone finds themselves on the receiving end of what they once inflicted, when they taste the betrayal they once served, when they feel the silence they once weaponized, when they are met with the coldness they once defended as boundaries. It is then that the ground beneath them shifts. The self they once trusted begins to crack. Their own hands become strangers to them, and in the quiet aftermath they meet the God they ignored, the God who uses their own cruelty as the soil for their awakening. Pain, when divinely assigned, is not just an emotion. It is an encounter. It is a mirror. It is a road back to the truth they once fled. When the person who once harmed you begins to suffer in ways that echo your own, they do not simply feel discomfort. They feel recognition. Their soul begins to whisper, "This is what I did. This is what I caused. This is what I ran from." And no voice in the world can unteach what pain now teaches with perfect clarity. God, in His mercy, does not shame them publicly. He does something more powerful. He humbles them internally, not for your revenge, but for their redemption. He lets them feel every cold echo of their sin until their soul breaks, not from despair, but from understanding. Their actions, once dismissed as harmless or necessary, now return to them like echoes bouncing off the walls of their own conscience, and the noise is deafening. No sermon can soften a heart like God's justice can. No lecture can awaken the soul like suffering that mirrors their own cruelty. They will not be able to explain it away. They will not be able to place the blame elsewhere, because deep down, in the quiet they can no longer avoid, they will know. They will know the wound in their life was shaped like the one they once gave, that the weight on their chest resembles the silence they left you in, that the distance they now feel is the very same they once forced you to walk alone. God will not let them escape the lesson. He is too faithful to truth, too devoted to justice, too loving to leave them unchallenged. Their own hands built the path they now tread. Their own words created the storm they now endure. But this is not punishment for the sake of pain. It is a divine reversal meant to bring sight to the spiritually blind. And once they feel what you felt, once they sit in the very sorrow they authored, their pride will no longer be their fortress. It will crumble under the weight of self-awareness. They will not be able to raise their chin with arrogance, because the God of justice will have touched their soul with the one force no man can escape: holy, purposeful pain. This is the mercy of God that corrects through consequence, that teaches through tears, that awakens through affliction. For some lessons are too sacred to be spoken, they must be lived. And when they are, even the hardest heart cannot remain the same. You may never receive the apology your heart longs for. You may never hear them admit the weight of what they did or see the remorse in their eyes. But do not mistake their silence for victory. Do not confuse their comfort for escape. For the God who watched you suffer in silence has not been idle. He has not forgotten. He has not overlooked. He has simply been preparing something greater than human apology. He has been preparing divine justice. The pain they gave you, the wounds they denied, the guilt they refused to carry, these were not erased, they were recorded. And though time may pass and seasons may shift, the day always comes when the soul is called to account. And on that day, they will not answer to you. They will answer to the God who stood beside you when no one else did, the God who heard what they ignored, the God who held you while they walked away, the God who will now let them feel what they believed would never touch them. You are not weak for loving deeply. You are not foolish for showing compassion. You are not mistaken in your sincerity. What they mocked, God treasures. What they exploited, God restores. And while they may have written you out of their story, God has written your healing into His. The story is not over. And it does not end with their cruelty. It ends with your rising, your healing, your peace. Because in the end, it is not you who must teach them. It is life. It is pain. It is the justice of God that arrives not in rage, but in perfect, quiet power. Through mirrors, through memories, through moments they cannot escape. And when that justice arrives, they will know. What they did to you was not forgotten. It was transformed. And now, in the hands of God, it becomes the very force that leads them to their knees. So rest, dear soul. Your tears were not in vain. Your silence was not wasted. And your story, though written with sorrow, is now turning its pages toward restoration. Let them feel what they made you feel, not because you wish them harm, but because God wishes them truth. And truth, in the end, sets both the hurt and the hurter free.